knew that Italian cooking was more than just pasta with red sauce, and I kind of wanted to highlight the pasta and how it can be more delicate rather than just with red sauce and parm on top. I've been cooking since I was 4, so I was very fortunate to kind of know what I wanted to do my entire life. And then after high school, I went to New England Culinary Institute in Vermont. I grew up in northeastern Maryland. So from there, I went to Vermont. I spent 3 years, got my bachelor's degree, and then I had the opportunity to work at the Four Seasons down here. And that's what prompted the move to Washington, D.C. And it was kind of closer to where I grew up. So it was, close to family and then a pretty big city to cook in. I was here right as it was starting to progress. After that, I went to the Ritz on M Street. I was very fortunate. Eric Ripert had West End Bistro while I was there, and I got to work under him. And I was very fortunate. A lot of times when chefs have these restaurants, they don't spend a lot of time in them, and Chef Ripert spent a lot of time. So I got to spend a lot of time in the kitchen with him. It's where I learned to cook fish. It's where I fell in love with cooking fish. And that's been a prominent part of my career since then. I had never cooked Italian food prior to Viola. And I just applied off a whim. I knew it was probably a top 3 restaurant in the city at that point when I applied. I went in, I did a tasting for Fabio, and it went really well. And he offered me a sous chef position, and I jumped all over it. It was the Italian restaurant in Washington, D.C. at that point. So it was very awesome to have that opportunity. It was very demanding, and it was very demanding in a good way. I learned a lot about how to run kitchens and how to manage large staffs. It was a dining room full of who's who of Washington, D.C. So it was kind of awesome to be a part of that and see that. At the same time, you have to kind of remember that they're just people, and they are going to get the same food that everybody else gets, and you kind of there is that pressure, but you try not to let it affect the way you cook, because then it spirals if you get too much pressure, and then it affects the other guests. The blessing that I had was there's a little bit of French and Italian overlap in Fabio's cooking, so it helped ease me into Italian food. And then other than that, I had to do a lot of reading, a lot of research, look at a lot of books to kind of see the flavor profile of what Italian food is. And here at Napoli, it's Napoli Pasta Bar, so we're known for pastas. And when I came aboard, it's a Neapolitan restaurant, and I wanted to kind of keep that soul of Neapolitan pasta with the Genovese and the pacri with the Neapolitan beef ragu, but still bring my kind of spin on Neapolitan dishes. So there's a lot of eggplant and a lot of tomato that goes on there. And what I'm going to do, and a big reason I'm here, is I like to try to bring local ingredients like fiddleheads and ramps and morels and things that grow in this area, and kind of incorporate them into these classic Italian dishes, and kind of put a mid-Atlantic spin on classic Italian dishes. The restaurant's built in an old house, and it was renovated before here to be a brew pub. And this upstairs area was not open up until about, I think, 6 months ago. And this was just empty space, and they remodeled it, and they turned it into this beautiful dining room that, you can kind of have 2 experiences down here. You can go downstairs and have a very intimate, very close, kind of dinner. Then, up here is very different. kind of flow with the high ceilings and the exposed brick. We have about a 60-seat patio that we open both for brunch and for dinner. Everybody loves dining al fresco, so it's a pretty cool thing to have. I'll change the menu almost every week up until the middle of November, when these the summer vegetables start to go away, and we're now cooking to more like stable ingredients like the roots and stuff like that, because during spring and summer things are very volatile. 1 week we have strawberries, 1 week we have asparagus, 1 week we don't. So as soon as we don't, we have to change the entire menu. This is my favorite time of the year to cook, because all winter you spend cooking things that might not be bright and green, and now you're getting all these like beautiful green ingredients that are very like short amount of time, like green strawberries. One of my favorite things to use, not with pasta, but like that's beautiful with burrata. If you pickle them and then serve them with fresh strawberries, it kind of gives a contrast of both sides of everything. When I was at San Lorenzo, I'd like to kind of push to see how far I could do things. I made a duck heart ragu, and the people loved it. And then I made a pig's, like a trotter ragu, trotter ravioli, and so I think I served it with morels and asparagus, and it was really cool to see the people take to eating some things that maybe people kind of like turn their nose up at, but it's very important that we utilize these things, because we can't just use the pork loin, the chicken breast, the duck breast. We have to like figure out how to use the liver, the kidneys, rabbit. They're a pretty small animal. Utilize the kidney and the liver is very important when you at least butcher rabbits and stuff like that. That's what I like about Italian cooking, is it lends itself to using those kind of cuts and stuff. So we're here in the kitchen at Napoli Pasta Bar, and we're just gonna make the porcini ragu that's currently going with the tagliatelle pasta, which is a little thinner shape, almost the style of fettuccine. And we start with a little bit of olive oil. We add some diced onions to it. We let those sweat down just a little bit, and it's not cooking if you don't add garlic. I always tell everybody that my everything I cook starts with onions and garlic, which is true. So we let that sweat down just until everything is a little opaque. So when I like to use for most of my cooking is Spanish onions. They have a little bit of sweet, a little sweeter than white onions. And then once the summertime hits, we can get Walla Walla onions or Vidalia onions, which are really sweet, and they give a lot of different body and texture and like characteristics to it. They're the best onions for making caramelized onions, just because of the sugar content. But in this kind of cooking, you don't really want the onions to kind of overpower the dish. You just kind of want it to add a little background note to it. Olive oil is usually what I start almost every ragu with, and it's usually always ragu, olive oil, onions, and garlic. And then once they start to sweat down a little bit, we have some cremini and porcini mushrooms. That's going to be really the base of the sauce and give it that unctuous mushroom flavor that we're trying to coax out of. Probably 4 times this batch, because this is one of our most popular pastas. And it's for good reason. It's a great vegetarian option, and you don't really feel like you're missing out on the meat ragus, because the porcini and the mushroom really add that little bit of unctuous umami that you usually get with the meat ragus. That cooks down for just a little bit until most of the water that comes out of the mushroom kind of creates its own little sauce. You can kind of see how even now it's starting to get a little bit emulsified with, you know, the onion, the olive oil, everything is starting to come together. But this, I kind of want the water to really cook out of the mushrooms and kind of create its own sauce. This is, on the menu, it's a mushroom and truffle ragu. So what we add is a product. So basically it is preserved truffle. So it's truffle peelings that it's sitting in its own juice, and it kind of gives it that that earthiness and that truffle taste without being super overpowering. And you're not adding truffle oil. You're not, you know, really overpowering the delicate flavor of the porcini or anything. It just is kind of add that background note so you know the truffle is there. So we're almost there with this. Last thing we do is we finish it with a little bit of salt, and then a little bit of white wine, and that kind of creates the base of the sauce. And this will cook down for, you know, just until the wine is cooked off, and then you add the pasta. I add just a little knob of butter, a little bit of Parmesan cheese, which is not super traditional in the south of Italy, but you know, that's kind of where my spin on these kind of dishes. However, you know, mushroom ragu is super traditional in the south. It's just a little bit different. And that's really the basis of the sauce. It's ready to go for the pasta. I mean, I'm sure you noticed that I didn't measure anything. I just had these bowls. And you know what? There's a great quote from Alan Ducasse, if, you know, every tomato has a different water content. So if you write a recipe for this tomato, that tomato might have a different water content. And that's kind of where cooking is way different than baking. Baking's a science. Cooking is, you know, it's all about touch and feel, and, you know, maybe these mushrooms have a little bit more water, or the onions, you know, are a little bit drier, so they might like burn a little bit more. The garlic is, you know, so it's all really about feel and touch. And that's why I love cooking so much rather than baking, just because it's so much of, you know, an exact science. And this is kind of, you know, you touch, you taste, you smell, and then you just kind of go from there.
Scusami, but you see, back in old Napoli, that's amore.